he explains that the concept where if you understand that everything emanates from one source, from God, and there's nothing which is outside of his ability. For instance, we find that the Talmud discusses a situation. There was a certain religion that when they would celebrate, they worshipped fire or light, then no one was permitted to have light within the house because they celebrated the god of fire. And they believed that the darkness represents evil and light represents something positive. And good and evil cannot emanate from the same location because either something's good or something's evil. That's what they believed. So if you find this good in the world and this evil in the world, evidently there must be a power representing evil and there must be a power representing good. So, and therefore, whatever you choose to become subservient to, that's what you become part of that negative power or the positive power. Because how do you have two things which are contradictory, emanating from the same source? It's either good or evil. Evidently, it's two separate powers. Now, the Gemara tells us that on Purim, we celebrate the destruction of evil. Amalek, the Amalekites. Haman, who was the viceroy of the Persian empire, he was able to solicit from Achashverosh, the Persian emperor, the decree to annihilate every man, woman, and child. And why was he the one? Because Haman was a descendant of the Amalekites. He personified what Amalek represents. And what do Amalek represent? They represent everything which is contrary to God. God's existence should not exist in this world. We just read in last week's reading that because we were attacked after the splitting of the sea by this band known as Amalekites, God says that the Amalek people must be obliterated from under the heavens. And until they're obliterated, my throne is not complete. Only after they're totally obliterated. And there's a positive commandment to destroy the Amalekites. And my throne is not complete until they're destroyed, because they are the antithesis to my presence. That's what it says explicitly in the Torah. Mordechai and Esther, who are the heroes of the Purim story. Esther was the queen of the Persian emperor. He wasn't aware that she was Jewish. Mordechai was her uncle. And Mordechai was not willing to bow before Haman. He deified himself. He would not bow to him. And this enraged him. Because of that, he said, I will destroy every Jew on the face of the earth. Men, women, children, regardless of who they are. And the decree was issued. Every man, woman, and child, young or old, has to be removed from the face of the earth. Ultimately, he was destroyed. He and his 10 sons were hanged. And rather than killing us on the 13th of Adar, we were given permission to destroy the Amalekites. In Shushan, which was the capital city of the Persian Empire, the Jews were permitted an additional day to destroy the Amalekites. That's the story of Purim. So the Talmud tells us that on Purim, a Jew has an obligation to drink to the point where he's not able to discern between Baruch Mordechai and Orah Haman. We say, blessed is Mordechai and cursed is Haman. You have to drink to that point where literally means you should say, cursed is Mordechai and blessed is Haman, which seems to be not understandable. I mean, you drink to the point where you curse the good and you bless the evil. Seemingly, it's contrary to any level of understanding. So the way it's understood is this. You drink to the point, people very often, when we see things, we appreciate them at a very superficial level. If you say to a person, Mordechai is blessed. Why is he blessed? Because he's the one who actually galvanized the Jewish people to repent, to fast, and due to their tshuva, God overturned the decree. That's why it's blessed is Haman. Blessed is Mordechai. And why is it cursed Haman? Because he tried to destroy us. That's why he deserves to be. He's evil, Mordechai is good. You bless good, you curse evil. Now, if you ask a person, why is evil meant to be cursed? She said, because it's evil. And why is good meant to be blessed? Because it's good. Now, the reason why evil has to be cursed is because it's contrary to good. If God didn't create anything which is classified as good, all this evil, there's no reason to curse evil. And if all that exists is good, there's no reason to bless good. So when you say blessed is good, what are you saying? In essence, evil should be cursed, because if good has to be blessed, automatically evil cannot exist. And when you say cursed is evil, why? There must be such a thing as good. Therefore, you're cursing evil. So in essence, there's no difference between blessed is good and cursed is evil. When you say one, in actuality, you're actually alluding to the other, because one is contradictory to the other. But if only one of these classifications exists, there's no reason why one should be blessed and one should be cursed. It's only because they're two things which are contradictory to one another. So a person has to drink to a point to be able to be reflective sufficiently to understand there is no difference between the two of them. When you say one, you're saying the other, and you're saying the other, you're saying the other. That's what it is. That's how I understand it. That's a person has to drink that you say, when you say cursed is Haman, you're saying blessed is Mordechai. And when you say blessed is Mordechai, you're saying cursed is Haman. Now, why is there evil? God created evil. And God created good. But how could one being who is good on the absolute level, on the perfect level, how does he create something which is contradictory to what he is himself? How's it possible? Evidently, the conclusion of the pagans was, it's two powers. Clearly. Of course, you can't have two things coexisting from the same source if that source is one or the other. What about if you believe God, everything emanates from God? Everything. Pre-God, pre-existence creation, nothing existed. Now, he created a setting that if he's involved, because he's the source of good, and he allows himself to be invested to the degree he wants to be invested, which is meant to be to the fullest capacity of existence, that's the ultimate good. Because then you have a relationship. You're exposed to his presence. Although his presence is infinite, But within the capacity of finite, it's the maximum exposure to him. As a result of that, is the ultimate good. But what happens if he should withdraw? He wills, his level of relationship is to a lesser degree. The absence of God's full involvement, that's evil. That creates this lack of, this void. Void is evil. I'll give you an example. There's so much oxygen in the room, and there's a very limited amount of oxygen. It's more difficult to breathe. But if you have enriched oxygen on an unlimited level, you breathe well, the organs are oxygenated, everything functions as it should, the organs and the limbs function on a perfect level. If you begin withdrawing the oxygen from the blood cannot maintain the internal and the external at that healthy level. What happens? They start atrophying. They start dying. What does that mean? Certain things set in. You're subject to infection. You're vulnerable to many things. Of course, you don't have a full degree of infusion of something positive. But that's only true if you understand the source of what makes everything healthy. If God is the source of all blessing, the moment he withdraws, the withdrawal causes the negative. And God, to create a setting of choice, he doesn't allow himself to be fully involved, although he wills existence, but to a degree that there's a degree of gray area. And with this gray, it's up to us to choose. Is it A or B? And if you choose negative, God withdraws to a greater degree. So even making the situation more complicated. More complicated. Because this seems to confirm that the negative, evil, is what's in control. Because the more evil you do, the more evil is empowered. But that's only because God withdraws. But if you do good at a greater level, then good gets the upper hand. And God's presence is more visible. The choice becomes an easier choice. But where do we start? Where do we start to understand that everything emanates from God? That's this week's reading. That's the Sinai experience. God revealed himself to the Jewish people to give them an understanding. Every Jew that stood at Sinai prophesied in the awake state. So every Jew was given understanding that everything that exists emanates from God. He is the creator. Creator means ex nihilo. Before he willed creation, nothing existed. Nothing means, it doesn't mean void, vacuum. It doesn't mean that. We cannot fathom what that means. Because even void and vacuum is part of creation. Because that is an entity of existence, void and vacuum. But when did he give us that understanding? So from the first moment, he gave us that understanding at Sinai. And we understood nothing exists outside of him at that moment. It's not only we understood, we saw. Because he revealed himself at that level, which is the maximum for a human being, for a finite being to understand or to absorb. Then God says, now you're on your own. Now it's up to you. You're not going to have that level of exposure any longer, where you can't deny the reality. Now I'm going to create a gray setting. And now you're going to question, although you saw the past, but as a human being, you're going to be subject to your physical state, to the vulnerabilities of the human being. And now you have to make choices. If you make the right choices, you empower the good. You make the wrong choice, you empower the evil. Why? What's the empowerment of evil? Because God's going to withdraw. But from get-go, we understand what the reality is. The proof of the pudding is, so what was Sinai? Sinai was Yichud Hashem. God says, there's not this, there's not that, there's God. And whatever he wills to be, that's what it is. It's not God is good and God is this or God is that. God is the source of everything. And whatever happens is because that's what he wills. He's not one of any one of those things. He is absolute. He's infinite. And he created a world with an objective. And the objective is to understand that everything emanates from him. And that's the ultimate purpose of existence, to realize that all the deficiencies of existence are only due because he's withdrawn to whatever degree. And for us, what we must do is to make enough right choices that it should be so invested in this existence that his presence is so obvious that the world will reach a level of perfection. Because if he's fully involved, then the world reaches its level of perfection, and we achieve that level of perfection. So you go back to what is the core of everything? The core of everything is his absoluteness in his being. It's not he has this power, he has that power. He is the Almighty, all. But he's much more than the Almighty. Because mighty is only what we understand mighty is. There are many things go beyond mighty. It's one of the things he is, he's almighty. But by saying he's one and nothing exists outside of him, that means that includes whatever it should follow. Good, evil, mercy, indiscriminate kindness, whatever you want to say, that all emanates from one. Almighty means, maybe he may be almighty. But what about he's almighty against something else? What's that something else? Maybe that's a separate entity. No. That all emanates from him being one. That's the understanding. So the Ramchal says, God doesn't want us to understand that he's merciful or that he's indiscriminately kind. So the 13 tenets of Jewish belief, there's nobody exists outside of God. That's a fundamental belief. That we speak about ramifications of that. He knows everything. He knows our thoughts. He knows our actions. He communicates with mankind. Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest father of all prophets. He wills everything every moment to be. Nothing happens unless what was, what is, what will be. It's only because he wills it to be. These are all expressions of his unity. But the key is to go back, to trace it back to the source. What is the source? Echod. Once you trace it back to the source, we don't understand how it works, so to say, but if he's everything, there's nothing beyond his ability to will and to allow to result from his willing whatever he wills. But where did we begin? We began at Sinai. You look for a needle in a haystack and you don't even know what the needle looks like. It's only what you think the needle looks like, then you look for it in the haystack. So what's the chance that you're going to find that needle? Well, you don't even know what the needle looks like. We know what the needle looks like. We know what God is. God is absolute. How do we know? Because we had that experience at Sinai. Now God goes into concealment to a degree. Now, despite the concealment, because of what we originally understood, we have to maintain that course and continuously upgrade based on that trajectory of what we understood at Sinai. That's exactly what it's all about. And that's what life's all about. It's very interesting. Until recent times, 40 years ago, there were certain fundamental values that existed in American society, ethics, morals, which were unquestioned. And it was the mainstay, the core of what the United States was, of society, of humanity within our sphere of existence. Since then, things have gone awry, things are questioned to death. It's been stripped bare, and what was is no longer. The ethics, the morals, even what's fact is no longer fact. The male is not a male, the female is not a female. Everything's questioned to death. And you may be this, but you may not be that. That's the level of confusion and distortion and perversion which has come about. How does it come about? Because if you make enough choices in the negative, that's the consequence of God withdrawing from existence. The more God withdraws, the darker it gets. When I say the darker, just night, we see things in the dark, we believe it's one thing, it's something else. And the darker it is, the distortion becomes even greater, because if our minds play games on ourselves, we imagine it to be, but it's not. When there's a greater degree of light, we pretty much, if you really take the effort and make the effort and take initiative, you could figure out with great effort, you could figure out what you're seeing. But if there's very little light, you really have to have special ability to discern between what is and what's not. But the average person who doesn't make that effort or doesn't have that ability, what does he come up with? He comes up with something which has no relevance to what the reality is. And that's what our society is today, whatever you want to call it. I don't even know what it is. Woke society, this society, that society, I don't know what it's called. But it's a society which what was is no longer, and what good is evil and evil is good. Many years ago, I want to offer an opinion on something which to me was black and white. And the person says to me, you have no right to be so judgmental. I was unaware of that term. That's called judgmental. If I see something to be wrong, and I say it's wrong, it's not acceptable, you can't be so judgmental. I said, why is it judgmental? Judgmental means if something's unclear and you have to pass judgment, that's judgmental. If you put your hand in the fire and you get burnt, now that I tell you fire burns, I might be judgmental about fire. It's a fact, fire burns. But if you don't see fire burns, and I say that is something which can be destructive, you get too close to it, and you believe it's something, if getting close to warms you, so getting in it is even better than warming you. No, you don't understand. If you keep your distance, you can benefit from it. You get too involved, you get burnt. But people don't understand that. But again, it's the same thing. But why? Why have things changed so drastically? The answer is there's only one answer, because God is withdrawing. And the more God withdraws, the less relevance you have to see truth. So a person says, but who says that's truth? Maybe today's the truth is the truth. What you believed at one time was fiction. It was delusion. Look, you can believe what you want. See, we as Jews, we know what truth is. You know why? Because truth is rooted in our tradition, which was given to us by God at Sinai. That's immutable. That doesn't change. So where we're secure and where we're tethered to, we're tethered to that truth. So as much as the winds of history blow and try to detach us from that root, it can't. That's how tethered we are to that. So as much as you want to convince us differently, we don't buy it because we know what the truth is. Does it make sense? The majority of the world don't believe what the Jews believe. The Jews throughout history have been murdered, tortured, and killed because of their religion. We're a handful of people. And we survived every Holocaust, every pogrom, every civilization that wanted to destroy us. And we're still here. Logically, doesn't make sense. It's against every odds, but yet we're always on top. How? How does it work? The answer is that speaks volumes that because we're attached to the absolute, the infinite, which is God, and we maintain his truth, therefore God keeps us going and keeps us above and be above extinction. That's why. The world is not attached to that degree. They were not privy to Sinai. They did not see the absolute. They were never exposed to the absolute. Everything is evaluation and analysis. That's where it begins. So if there's enough light, it's easy to make the analysis, to come upon truth. But if there's not enough light, then everybody has his own ideas of what truth is, and the end result is what society is experiencing today.